funny.
It is funny. Kick us off.
I'll kick us off. So, hi, I'm Carolyn Ford. Welcome to the Point. And I'm here with Eric Trexler. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Carolyn. I'm not ready yet.
You're
I'm
ready.
just kidding. Let's go.
You're ready because Dave is here. Dave is back. Dave welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back. I'm always reminded, given the time zone difference, that I always feel like I'm encroaching on your cocktail hour there on the East Coast. I'm just getting my day started after the holidays, and it's Monday, and I'm raring to go. Had 2 coffees already, but you guys are already looking at happy hour. So,
Caroline, I think that's a comment about you because I don't drink.
There you go.
I'm in Utah. It's midday. Okay, it's getting close.
It's only 1 o'clock with you, Caroline.
It's only 1 o'clock. That's right. So, Dave, well, first of all, welcome back. Like I said, we have Dave, your CIO for the Navy. Will you just remind our listeners?
Hold on, Nick Tam's pack.
Yeah, that's
there we
right.
Go. I was just going to ask you to remind our listeners what you do exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure you could give me Mr. Aaron Weiss's job. He is the CIO for the Navy, and what a superstar of a CIO he is. The prospect of moving back to the Pentagon or Crystal City or wherever that is, and having that range of responsibilities. What's that phrase? I think it was from a Clint Eastwood movie. A man's got to know his limitations. So good on Aaron for doing
Otherwise known as I just love living on the beach.
Right. Yeah.
And your one-liners, I listen. So we had you in April to talk about the crisis CIO, and there were so many good one-liners. I mean, you are so quotable. So this is going to be another really good episode.
You're setting the bar too high, Carolyn.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned when we were speaking before is that we're 8 months into this thing now, and we've left the sprint mode and we're into this marathon mode. And one of the things that you talked about back in April, that you felt like you were the chief resilience officer now, and that your number one concern was your people. So first, how are you doing? How are your people doing?
Yeah, so marathon indeed. I mean, who could? I think I also mentioned in those earlier discussions we had of either failures of imagination or blind spots when it came to imagining what the future would look like, and this is an ever evolving sort of epiphany that we've had a failure of imagination, and not in a good way, right? The notion that this would turn into a marathon, turn into a really long drawn out process, if you can call it a process, this sort of continual discovery of just how bad a thing can be.
Yeah, and especially, just coming off of Thanksgiving weekend, I mean, we're all fatigued with this.
Yeah.
You guys have got to be more so even than many, just with all of, I think with all of the extra stipulations that you guys have to deal with.
You're saying the military, Carolyn?
The military, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and we're not that, we're not that much different than other significant, mission essential segments of our economy and our nation, our culture, our world. There's an idea in marathons of kind of hitting stride, right?
Yeah.
And you sort of, you know what the thing is going to be because you've sort of trained for it. You count yourself as pretty resilient, pretty tough. But there's this notion of hitting stride and overcoming pain, overcoming, sort of the fatigue. So there's some real good analogies there that we're dealing with the pain, the fatigue, and we're trying to dig deep within ourselves and continue to stay on pace and stay in stride, knowing that the race is essential, right? So I think that's really key. Those kind of first foundational principles that you train on, you acculturate, you build them into your traditions. You try to recruit and hire people and develop people to have that kind of strength, resilience, fortitude, and also a bit of humility thrown in that you don't quite know how bad it's going to get, right? So
Well,
So
that's one of the
stay
things,
humble.
as you said that, Dave, I was thinking about with the marathon, you said, what you're in for. You know that it's
Yeah.
26.2
and you
miles,
train.
right? And you train for it.
You train for that, right?
The way you're talking about this kind of reminds me, not that I've been through it, but more like buds, where you don't know what you're in for necessarily.
Right.
Like it's such a psychological mind. Not going to use that word, but you know what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a big part of COVID, Carolyn. I mean, you don't know what's coming next. You know roughly, but we've never been through this. I was reading an article this morning that due to the the advances in public health in the developed world, this is the first generation ever who isn't prepared for pandemics like this, who really have no idea. I mean, all of our predecessors have faced massive death with the flus and the plague and things like that, but you don't know what's coming next. We don't know how long this will be. It's tough. So we're in our stride, I think is what you're saying, Dave, but we don't know when the race ends.
Yeah, and this comes back to the people, right, Carolyn? Your question was, how are we doing? What about the people? So I think there's there's real value and a lot of learning in observing how people and cultures, operating institutions, how they kind of respond to adversity, right? And look, if you look back in history, as Eric points out, you can be philosophical and say, well, it could be worse, right? It could have been doubled up with war and pestilence and all kinds of other things, that sort of go with it, right? So there've been times in our history as a people where we've had to prove a lot more resilience and a lot more courage and a lot more strength than this. So putting all that in perspective, I think, is important. But with respect to our teams, we've learned a lot about ourselves. We've learned a lot about the team culture, right? So I said in our last conversations, things like failure is not an option, right? Our missions are all critical. We have to execute them. We are actually hitting stride in the sense that we've learned a lot and are adapting to new routines. We've figured out how to host visitors that are essential for maintenance, systems engineering visits, installation visits, things that are really critical business that have to carry on. We've learned how to protect our critical watches, right? The 24/7 operations and maintenance crews. We've learned how to do that. We've had really remarkably good success when we look at the numbers around us of COVID cases and so forth, even on Navy ships and so forth. We have, knock on wood, right? We have not been subjected to or unlucky enough to have had a significant breakout, right? We've been very careful with our protocols. We haven't gotten complacent or lazy. It's been as intense and focused as it was from day one, and it's still that way today because there's a deep understanding of the criticality of our mission. So that part is good. Where I get concerned and we've taken some steps to reach out to people and really do some measurement and some gauging, through the sorts of questions on command climate surveys and so forth, is how are people doing? How are they holding on, right? And this gets to that article I cited, in our email exchange about, are you falling into the trap of, in this crisis mentality of feeling like you have to be always on, always present, always on the job, that you have to raise the standards beyond any expectation or any reasonable, sort of level. And you worry about people collapsing under the weight of that, overworking themselves, right? The article was The Presence Prison by Jason Fried, I think is how he pronounced his name, Fried. He wrote that article back in 2017. And if you think about how prescient that was, I don't know that he ever would have predicted a global pandemic, but he was referring more to the phenomenon of ubiquitous, IP technologies that allow full-featured collaboration and presence all the time. And it's creating this kind of new standard of being always on, always in the moment, always on the job, always responsive. being captive or slave to the green dot, right? Being always available and reachable, no matter what the priority of the issue might be. And it was a prescient article back in 2017. I used it some weeks ago in a correspondence to our extended team across NICTAMs to say, hey, guard yourself against this presence prison. You want to be as rigorous and complete about work-life balance and having a complete, approach to your life, because this is a marathon and we need you and the missions are critical and we're concerned about you, right? Mental health, happiness, life balance, physical health, setting unreasonable standards for yourself or for your people. Those are things to be really guarded against.
I almost feel it's an unknown distance run, right? We're running, and you've got to keep yourself going, not knowing when it's going to end.
Well, and that's why I kind of compared it to Navy SEALs, the BUDS program, right? Because they don't know what's coming.
You keep performing, you don't quit, and you don't get hurt.
Right.
And you just keep digging. And that's almost what we're doing here, except, it's the entire workforce. So Dave, how are your people handling it?
Yeah.
What's the number one thing you would do if you had a magic wand to help them?
That's an interesting question, because people. I think a lot of folks, especially in our culture, the military culture. I used a phrase in the recent correspondence with my team, something to the effect of, please don't suffer in silence, right? If your mental well-being, your attitude about work, or just your overall demeanor and happiness level of satisfaction with your life, if it's really in trouble, if you're hopeless or you have a sense of doom and gloom and so forth, and it's pervading into the different parts of your life, the ask, the question or the request I made to my team is, don't suffer in silence. Talk to somebody about it. I mean, for goodness sake, come talk to me about it, or talk to another leader or mentor or advisor that you trust, and sort of talk it out and air it out a little bit and seek advice, seek examples. Some people can get to a level where you really want to think about some level of formal counseling. So I'm a big fan in life of mentors and mentorship, and it's not just a work thing; it's a life thing, and I think it can be anathema to the military culture where people sort of regard themselves as warriors. Maybe they were warriors and then they retire and they become civilians, or they still are warriors. So they pride themselves on stoicism and courage and taking the pain and muscling through. Right? There's a whole culture for that. And Carolyn, I know you must be very familiar with the special operations community. It's the whole traditional cultural foundation of special operations is that silent, stoic, tough, resilient warrior. So, and this is how military folks end up with PTS and with other mental problems. When they leave the service, right? Because they hold too much in. They do suffer in silence. It's viewed as perhaps less than courageous or less than honorable to go seek help, seek advice, or to admit failure. So your question was, what would I want to do to help people? Number one is make sure they know they're part of a team. They're sort of part of a professional family. Their leaders and supervisors and peers care about them. They should not suffer in silence if they are suffering. And there is mentorship and sort of life coaching, life counseling type help to be found. Some of it formal, some of it informal.
And the military is great at that. I mean, the military really does a good job. Yeah. So ask for help. Don't suffer in silence. Reach out, but ask for help. Ask somebody for help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've communicated that message to everybody across the deck plates of NICTAM's PAC and our extended telecommunications and IT enterprise. I don't want to overplay this, by the way. I mean, we're among the most fortunate. I look out and you guys, I'm sure, see the same thing in areas where you travel and where you live. Military, intelligence community, DoD, government, whatever. We have jobs. We're still getting paid.
Yeah.
Our missions are viewed as critical. So I don't want to kind of overplay this, but there is a fatigue and a burnout that's making its way in of trying to execute these critical missions, make it all look normal when there's really nothing normal about it. And I think really attentive, in tune leaders really need to pay attention to people and constantly ask and probe and find out how are they doing and see how, offering an encouraging word, some advice to be heeded, some ideas to read about, just a kind of a sounding board to talk to, and a culture that says it's okay to be fatigued, it's okay to be a little depressed and perhaps lack a little bit of hope, but you're part of a bigger team, and there folks can reach out and sort of boost your spirits, get some spring back in your step. So that's what I'd want to do for everybody is make sure they're not suffering in silence and sort of having their own personal collapse in the middle of a global crisis.
So you mentioned the idea of coming into this not normal operating environment. And one of the things that you mentioned back in April is that you thought by now the government being we, would be a lot more tolerant, and the military specifically, of bring your own device, choose your own device, and that we would be, talking about it and allowing it more. Have you seen that?
Yeah. So what's that old phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So there've been some minor moves, since the stand-up of this kind of free and open, they call IL2, Impact Level 2 collaboration enterprise across the DoD, right?
Really dealing with low sensitive data.
Yeah. So I would hardly suggest that that our senior officials are sort of cutting corners or playing loose here, but again, necessity has been the mother of invention. There have been things we've had to do in order to continue the missions, the operations, the business of the DoD. And they've had to make some accommodations, even some compromises. And I don't mean compromise in the sense of classified information, but when you turn more than 1 million people loose with their own mobile devices, cell phones, laptops, what have you, and you plug them into a common DoD collaboration enterprise, you're taking some risks. They've tried to tighten up the hatches, batten down the hatches in a couple of areas where they have found those risks to be more concerning. But we're sort of flying on the seat of our pants here a little bit with this enterprise, and my understanding is we will do so until next summer. And then the larger DoD and the combatant commands and the military departments are all going to map themselves into a much more seriously governed, tightly managed, monitored, orchestrated set of enterprise capabilities. It'll still be roughly the same feature set that the whole CVR Teams thing has brought to us. But they're going to have to figure out how to accommodate either a bring your own device or choose your own device or some type of provisioned mobile device framework that is governed as part of the larger IL5 and above, right? Impact level 5 and above. So that's the control classified and the national security systems type data. So it's a higher level of protection. Now how you do that and also allow.
So sorry, before you continue on.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So a lot of your people are using their own devices.
Sure.
But are you saying like next spring we're going to walk that back? We're going to have a different set of rules?
My sense is we'll have to.
Okay.
Now, you'd want to interview, the some of the folks on the acquisition side at DISA and at the DISA policy level and the DoD CIO policy level. And I know, Eric, you've got connections with all those folks to really get a ground truth answer on how do you rationalize an agile, bring your own or choose your own device governance model with I'll call it a rigorous IL5, right, impact level 5 accreditation type of model. To me, at my sort of low perch out here in the Pacific, those ideas seem kind of irreconcilable, especially when you throw in,
it's a hard problem. Right. The intelligence agency is an easy way to look at it in my mind. They've got the most classified of information we have, right? So you can't let people just take that home and work with it like we would in the corporate environment, because you're talking people's lives. You're talking, the deepest secrets we have in this country. But they can't necessarily go into the office either, Carolyn, to work all the time as we have in the past. So how do you allow for a distributed workforce without opening the floodgates to lack of oversight, control, or anything else? Some level of control. But those controls have always been based on physical boundaries, either network physical boundaries, guards, gates, shacks, things like that. So how do you let someone take a top secret document home and work on it? Well, the answer is today, you don't.
Yeah, unless you got a few stars on your collar, or you're at that level, or you have specially assigned housing that has a skiff in it and so forth. So there's a combination.
But even then, they have some controls. Even if the control is we're only going to allow flag rank personnel to take information home, or some flag rank personnel. But so I use the intelligence community because it's almost binary, black and white, on and off. You're either in the skiff and able to work, or you're not, and you're not. When we talk DoD, when we talk impact level 5, which, Dave, keep me clean here, controlled unclassified data. Controlled, but unclassified. When we talk impact level 6, secret level data, so, classified information. As you go up the control level, the number of controls, the amount of sensitivity, the importance of the information loosely corresponds with the number of restrictions you have. So you've almost got this push-pull. How do you let people work on the most classified information when they can't work at home, but they only have to work at home? They can only work at home.
Yeah, and I would say
problem.
it's a tough problem, and the intelligence community, much more than sort of I'll call it the GenSer DoD community, is really having to wrestle with that challenge already today. It'll be by rare exception, and it'll probably be by critical position, by rank, by as a mission essential, criteria and so forth, that you do those things, and some of those things are being done today. For the masses, right? For the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions of DoD personnel, military, civilian, contractor, who are kind of in and around organizations like mine. I think where this is going to take us is, honestly, and I've posted on this topic on LinkedIn and so forth, a governed choose your own device. It's going to have budgetary implications in that. How do you provision a guy like me with the right computing environment at work and the right computing environment at home or on the road? How do you encapsulate that in a enterprise governance structure that's light but reasonably rigorous, right? And then how do you manage it in runtime and create some assurances, right? So you guys have interviewed people a lot smarter than me on zero trust and some of the emerging methods we can use with wireless networking and so forth for slicing and for unique identity management, unique encryption and control plane, management plane technologies. Those things are all out ahead of us in terms of likely investments and creating a lot of opportunity to be agile in the way we govern, these type of freewheeling enterprises. But we're going to have to get there kind of one step at a time. By next summer, when an IL5 Microsoft Teams, kind of full-featured enterprise across all the combatant commands, all the military departments, and the Pentagon Fourth Estate, the Joint Community, all those tenets are going to have to get stitched together. We have all spent a year and a half by then, sort of learning our way into this full-featured, always-on collaboration environment. That includes, by the way, sessions like this with folks like you, right, external to the DoD enterprise.
So
Right.
Is that the plan or is that your dream?
Well, so the rhetoric, or I'll call it the aspirational capabilities and requirements targets that you hear from our senior leadership, from folks like Mr. Dana Deasy and from Mr. Aaron Weiss up at the Don, is that we will not turn the clock back in terms of capability.
Yeah.
So there's some folks working really, really hard right now trying to design that, trying to figure out how we're going to govern it, trying to make sure that the programs and budgets are there to deploy the right technologies on time. The endpoints are going to be tricky. I think where this takes us is to a CYOD, where I will give up my personally owned $350 HP laptop here, and the Navy will issue me some governed device that is mine to take where I want, connect to Wi-Fi where I want. It won't be a classic VPN. I think it's going to have to be a much more agile approach to a VPN approach. We've got mobile laptops now on NMCI with VPNs, and there's a whole bunch of things that don't work on them, right? And I think all the services have their example of that. So.
But that is aligned. It's aligned with where the industry is going, and I would even say, Dave, handing out a laptop. I mean, I've been in commercial industry now. Let's see, since I left the Army, 96 probably, 95, and I've always had a laptop.
Yeah.
I've always had a company phone or access to a phone. It's just something you get issued, almost like when I was in the Army. I got a K-Pod, I got a rifle, I got all my gear. You would think that would not be a stretch, and that would be easier to secure in some ways than the laptop or computer that everybody's using at home, or even assuming people are going to have a home system. I understand mobile devices, phones. Maybe you limit the accessibility to something like that. But you would think that we'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, and there's the ever-present issue of cost, right? And I always say, scale is its own innovation problem, right? And scale is most certainly its own cost problem. The cost of sort of the occasionally recurring technology refresh for more than 1 million endpoints, just for the Department of the Navy of some form or another, in addition to office equipment and mobile sort of CYOD type equipment, some reasonable refresh rate, right, factored into your program, and then the operations and sustainment, license costs, support costs, patching, having them integrated into some type of zero trust governance environment where they're reasonably monitored, with SOC type sensors and analytics. That's, as they say, bring money, right? I mean, there's a whole enterprise sustainment cost that goes with that. So those are the kind of hard trades that have to get made. Just because we can declare something feasible doesn't mean we can afford to do it. So the real challenging times ahead. I guess I put it this way: in some ways it's kind of a good problem to have. Years ago, before the pandemic hit.
That was months. That was only months ago.
Yeah, but I mean, for the better part of 10 or 15 years, I mean, some of my professional history includes some experience with collaborative tools. Back in the 90s, like 1996, I was on a project team working for NSA and the NRO and a few others, figuring out how to bring nascent collaboration capabilities into intelligence community networks. 1996, right? That was before Facebook and before LinkedIn and before Twitter and all that Instagram and so forth.
Those were the days of AOL and CompuServe.
Exactly, right? So I've been a sort of impatient sort of person saying, well, gosh, if we could do that back in 1996,
we'll figure it out.
Why is it taking us so long to get to a full-featured, IP collaboration services culture? Why did it take till 2020? Well, I'll tell you why. It took a global pandemic. So this is kind of it's a good problem to have. It's accelerating. It's going to accelerate a necessary change for us, and we'll innovate our way through the governance and the design and the cost and the deployment and sustainment. We'll figure that out. We're the world's greatest defense department, world's greatest intelligence community. So as clouds have a silver lining, one of the silver linings of global pandemic for us is we can get on with the future, right?
Right. So Dave, go ahead, Caroline.
Well, in April, you talked about some of the programs that you were hoping would accelerate, like JEDI, to help with these problems. So I want to know, have any of those programs accelerated, come to fruition, helped you out with this very problem?
Or
am I not allowed to ask that?
Well, my lawyers advised me to keep quiet on JEDI. It's still
they're coming.
It's still in JEDI land, and if I'll put it this way: if the Honorable Dana Deasy is cautious about talking about JEDI, the field rat Dave McDonald is going to be really cautious talking about JEDI. But we're all looking forward to JEDI and things like it, right? And a ubiquitous, pre-provisioned, adaptable, agile sort of
capability space.
Capability space.
So Dave,
that's huge, right? For our future.
I think this is a difference, though. You're in this massive multi-million person enterprise, right? 5 million, give or take, across the DoD. Things don't move quickly.
Yeah.
Right. You're trying to procure cloud services. They will accelerate, but we've got the acquisition problems. We've got the who picks which technology. How do we interoperate technology wise? If I needed to spin up Amazon for my team, I would just get it done, right? We use a pro card and get it done, put a PO through, take a couple weeks maybe, which I get frustrated with. I don't want to pick on JEDI or even spend time there, but it is it's almost a monument, a placeholder, a representative sample of how long it takes us to bring technologies online in the DoD. And we've got to change that. It's just too long. It doesn't allow you, the operator, to do what you need to do. My opinion, not yours.
So Eric, let me offer you another angle to look at this from, because I've lost track of how many articles, blog posts, LinkedIn posts of people who opine that DoD acquisition is just broken, right? And we need to get faster. We need to get ourselves out of the valley of death. We need agile, fast acquisition. And how come OTA, other transaction authority, is still not fast enough, right?
Right.
But let me give you there's a counterpoint here to this that is really important to state, keep a track on. And it's as simple as, that great American idea of competition, that foundational, deeply rooted, historically proven idea of competition, right? And weaved into competition is fairness and agility, and that there are aspects of speed that can take place. There is innovation. There is kind of the marketplace of ideas. There's a participative economy, right? There's just these rooted ideas in American competition. So, I've heard people talk about, the monolithic, unitary R&D and governance model of the Chinese, right? Well, China is a tyrannical, repressive, autocratic, Marxist, anti-competitive society at their very heart, at their very root. And we don't want that, right? We want
Agreed.
just the opposite of that. So what's the trade-off for a robust, competitive American economy, competitive American.
Well, in this case, it's speed, right? It's
Well,
velocity.
that it's velocity, right? So I'll double down on the idea that defense acquisition is not broken. It's got some characteristics and attributes kind of weaved into it by its very nature of being competitive and fair and even deliberative when it comes to getting to the right answer. Now, where I sort of jump in with the acquisition reform conversation, the advocates for acquisition reform, is there are certain kinds of acquisitions and research and development that you don't have to take 20 systems engineers and put them in a tank for 12 months and sort of overcook requirements, right? Using sort of a model-based systems engineering kind of construct or a DODAV architecture construct. That's really wasteful and expensive and time-consuming, and also, some parts of industry look upon that and say, "What are you guys doing?" Right? For the last 10 years, we've had mature commercial technologies that you could pull off the shelf that would meet, more than 80% of your postulated requirements, and then we could iterate our way to the other 10 or 20%, right? So overcooking requirements is not what I'm talking about. We need to sort of get over that bad habit.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But keeping robust processes in place for competition and for inclusivity and sort of a participative defense industrial economy, man, that's immutable stuff. You got to hang on to that.
I think we're in agreement. I just want
and
faster.
have we proven that we can do that? Like in the last 8 months? I mean, haven't we done some of that?
Yeah, I think so. I'll give an example. It's something I'm very much involved in out here in the Pacific. Look at the Defense Department's research and development investment path for 5G next G, right? So it's a great topic. You could have a whole session on 5G next G and what's the future of zero trust wireless, the whole dialogue happening at the national level about private versus public wireless network infrastructures and so forth. So I'm involved in some of that out here. We initiated the Hawaii, the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam 5G portfolio, and we're underway with OSD R&E to get that going. That's a case. You watch how that unfolds, right? It's being undertaken through a series of OTAs, right? Both the National Spectrum Consortium and we're using the Navy's IWRP, the Information Warfare Rapid Prototyping Program, and you're going to see a very competitive, very participative process unfold across, probably a couple $2 billion of RDT&E investment over a 5 to 10 year window to accelerate exploration and adoption of secure wireless technologies. Hugely important for fixed infrastructure on our bases and stations, overseas sites, the ability to rapidly deploy and package up those kind of capabilities for forwarding operating bases, for maneuvering platforms like aircraft carriers, what have you, integration of those kinds of capabilities with space. Hugely important. You've been reading the articles about joint all-domain command and control. There's a nexus with 5G next G there that's really critical. Coming back to the original point of conversation, though, I think what you're already seeing with the 5G participation by industry is it's a hugely interesting, dynamic, lucrative, really open-ended, competitive environment for anybody that's got something to bring to the table there, whether it's a niche capability or the overarching, sort of mobile network operator type of, the big AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, the big players in telecommunications and wireless. Everybody's going to have the chance to play in something as interesting, diverse, and integrated as 5G next G and the future of secure wireless. So that's an example. Now,
and that's pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and through OTAs and R&D money, there's all kinds of things you can do pretty fast, right? You don't have to get stuck in the RMF, 7-step death march. You can hit the easy button on some things. The question is, I said a few minutes ago, scale is its own innovation problem. How do you assure yourself in those experimental portfolios that each one doesn't slide, ever so quietly into the valley of death? How do you sort of stimulate the process so when you really nail it, when you really have it figured out, you can scale and you can operationalize and you can get the economies of scale and the operational benefits of scale, and then continue to, sort of mature and support and sustain and refresh. That's its own wicked innovation problem. I don't want to downplay how hard it is to experiment, but almost anybody with a checkbook can experiment.
Right.
It takes some real wherewithal
to go enterprise level.
To go enterprise and scale and sustain. That really takes some leadership and some thought processes and some cultural change that we haven't entirely figured out. The Valley of Death is one of my favorite subjects, if you can't tell. But this 5G thing is going to be really fascinating to follow over the next 3 to 5 years. At what point do we sort of say, yeah, this is a game changer. It's a force multiplier. Let's get on with it. Let's start executing at scale. I'll tell you, the Chinese are already executing at scale. So,
is 5G in place now with you guys? To a certain degree.
It's in some small experimental pockets.
Okay, yeah. And that's what you're saying. We might fall into the Valley of Death. I'm not familiar with the Valley of Death.
Oh gosh, Carolyn, that's you could.
That's a podcast in itself.
That's a podcast in itself. The Valley of Death, right? So no, much has been written on the Valley of Death, including what was it? The Eric, you probably read. You're an inquisitive sort of DoD acquisition nerd like I am. The 809 panel report from a couple of years ago had a lot to say about the Valley of Death.
I can tell you I have not read that, and I'm not sure I'm going to, but I'll write it down.
I'll tip you the link, Eric.
Please do.
I think it's a 3 or 4 part volume set. It's a solid 400 pages of light weekend reading.
Why would you read that?
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. Stuff.
Okay, Dave, I want to take you back. I want to go back to a young Dave, 9 months ago.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah.
If you could talk to yourself and say, if there's one thing you could do right now, what would you say? One mistake you've made, one thing reflecting back, it doesn't have to be a mistake, but reflecting back over the last 9 months or so where we've dealt with the pandemic. What's one thing you would say, Dave, you're going to hit a point in time and I want you to do this?
Oh, gosh. So
it's only been 9 months. This shouldn't be that hard.
So one of the teams that I've got as part of our overall CIO group at NICTAMS is the Knowledge Management Information Management team, IMKM team. And we, you talk about staying humble and staying inquisitive, right? We had, for years, we had talked ourselves into the idea that our IMKM portfolio, our team, our services on SharePoint, the way we undertook user-centered design and some DevOps type of application development was pretty world-class, right? We had talked ourselves into thinking, man, we're one of the best in the Navy, right? We had benchmarks from IGs. We had, people sort of pointing to our portfolio saying, man, you guys are really doing IMKM. And it reminds you to always be questioning your assumptions about what you, your team, your organization are really doing. Because I'll be frank, I mean, we and I, as someone who's been there a long time, so I should have been there long enough to know better, right? We had talked ourselves into thinking we were so good and so complete in our thinking that we were ready for anything and our value proposition was understood and so forth. Truth be told, there's a lot more that should have been done, could have been done. We perhaps should have put more pressure on the enterprise to allow us to do things a little more completely. So, and it goes beyond what we've already talked about, right? The whole teams and collaboration and some of the commodity services that we're going to grow to take for granted here over time. It really gets to tailoring knowledge management and information management solutions to the mission and business, logistics, and support of your organization. There's a lot more we could have done. A lot more.
And that would have prepared the team for the pandemic, work from home,
absolutely,
the distributed workforce, everything much more.
Absolutely. This goes back to earlier comments I made to you folks about failure of imagination. If you had told me 3 years ago that, hey, your SharePoint investment, we had spent money to upgrade to SharePoint 2013. We sort of virtualized it, to build some continuity of ops, depth into the capability. But never in my wildest imagination would I have thought, okay, I need to figure out how to enable this for bring your own device or choose your own device, or there's certain applications and workflows that are going to be critical and exceedingly difficult in a virtualized, teleworked, crisis-oriented environment. And if we had started to think about those contingencies, we would have designed some different capabilities. We would have configured and governed our knowledge management enterprise differently. So yeah, blind spots and failure of imagination for sure. There's a bunch of things I probably would have done with our KMIM portfolio, a year, 2, 3 years ago if I'd had any kind of a crystal ball on this kind of scenario.
Yeah, 2020, it's great.
Yeah.
In hindsight.
Yeah. So that, IMKM, if it's dynamic and robust, it's kind of always on. You're always adapting and redesigning workflow, and you're always doing customer outreach. You're iterating, and one of my favorite development ideas before DevOps was cool, UCD was cool, right? User-centered design, and sort of the whole workflow modeling, sort of ground up approach to iterative design and delivery of capabilities. So our team is equipped to do those things. This wasn't a lack of capacity. It was a lack of imagination, right?
I just read Bob Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime, I believe. And one of the comments that really stuck with me, Carolyn, was innovate or die. He talks about his journey at ABC and Disney from, very junior role right out of college all the way up through CEO, and innovate or die. And it's a good reminder to always go back and look and say, okay, what more should we do? How do we change? How do we put ourselves out of business? How do we iterate?
A lot of this gets at some, leadership ideas. So I've always been a fan of, I think the author is Lencioni, right? Lencioni did 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And then I think more recently, The Ideal Team Player, wherein the notion of humble, hungry, and smart, as ideal team player characteristics. Humble, hungry, and smart. And when I think of those characteristics, they are so foundational to this leadership thinking and anticipatory kind of eliminating blind spots, opening one's imagination, right? Humble is just always be thoughtful and guarded about what's going to come from the side or come from behind and going to surprise you. So that's humble. Hungry is intellectually hungry, inquisitive, be fearless about asking those really difficult questions. Don't fall into a sense of having achieved, right? So humble and hungry are so key. And then watching the guideposts, right? What are the clues? What's the art of the possible? So I like that's a book I'd recommend to everybody, and we actually have incorporated into our hiring criteria of
nice.
This looking for those attributes of humble, hungry, and smart.
Humble, hungry, and smart. What's the name of the book again?
Yeah, it's the idea is pulled from Lencioni's The Ideal Team Player.
The Ideal Team Player. Okay, you know what? We're gonna have to end there, but what a great place to end, right, Eric? Yes. I got a new read.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I'm going to offer to our listeners, be the first one to share this episode, and let me know that you shared it on LinkedIn. And I will. You're
giving away another book?
I'm going to send them their own copy of Nope, not Humble, Hungry, and Smart. Tell me the name of the book. The Ideal Team Team player. There we go.
Yeah.
How to be humble, hungry, and smart. So thank you.
Patrick Lencioni, marvelous author. And also, Carolyn, I'm going to send you the link to the 809 panel report.
Great.
So
I'm sure our listeners can't wait to read that.
I know Carolyn's going to be all over that, Dave.
Does it have a wizard in it or a Jedi?
Yeah, there's a Cliff Notes executive summary in front of each of the volumes. But that's
a no, Carolyn. That's a no. So Dave, catch some more sunrises. It's a long unknown distance marathon. So try to take care of yourself out there also and the team.
Yes, sir. And
thank you.
Carolyn, great to see you. Eric, great to see you. I hope you're staying healthy and happy and knowing when to turn the machine off. Right.
Yeah.
So don't fall into the presence prison.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much, Dave.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.